This is an example of a high-quality screencast, and the example that I'm using is the basketball-volleyball program that you had to write over the summer. So this is an example of a high-quality screencast. So in this problem, we had to write a program that made a basketball and a volleyball at the locations given, and to draw arrows from the basketball, from the origin to the basketball, another arrow from the basketball, from the origin to the volleyball, and then one more arrow that goes from the volleyball relative to the basketball. So it's going to go from the basketball to the volleyball. And this line right here, that makes the basketball as a sphere, and the position is the same position that's given in the book, and I made it orange. This next line draws an arrow that represents the arrow that points from the origin, so the position of the arrow is 0, 0, to the location of the basketball. So that's why the axis here is axis.pos. And then the color, I made it blue. This line makes a volleyball. Its position is at the position given in the problem originally, and the color is white. This next line makes an arrow that points from the origin, which is why the position is 0, to the volleyball's location. So I've used volleyball.pos as the axis, and color is blue. This line right here makes an arrow that points from the basketball to the volleyball. It's the position of the volleyball relative to the basketball. So in order to do that, the arrow's position is going to be located where the basketball is, because that's going to be our reference point. And then the tip of the arrow is going to be where the volleyball is relative to the basketball. So that's going to be the difference between the volleyball's position and the basketball's position. We're going to go final minus initial. So if the final point needs to be where the volleyball is and the initial point is where the basketball is, then the difference between the two is going to be the axis for the arrow, and that will point towards where the volleyball is relative to the basketball. And I made that yellow. So if we run it, we will see, hopefully, the basketball and the volleyball. Yep. So here's the volleyball. There's the arrow that goes from the origin to the volleyball. There's the basketball, and then this blue arrow goes from the origin to the basketball. And then the yellow arrow is the position of the volleyball relative to the basketball, so it starts at the basketball and points towards the volleyball. The next part of the problem asked us to change the positions of the basketball and the volleyball. So I will do that. The new position of the basketball needs to be -4, 2, 5. And the new position of the volleyball needs to be 3, 1, -2. And it says that if we correctly use symbolic names, then all the arrows should automatically adjust. So let's see if that works. Yep, it did. The basketball and the volleyball are in new positions. Here's the origin. We still see we have the blue arrow that goes from the origin to the basketball. We have the other blue arrow that goes from the origin to the volleyball. And then we have the yellow arrow that points from the basketball to the volleyball. It gives us the relative position of the volleyball relative to the basketball. So everything automatically adjusted just by changing those numbers in the beginning. So that's one of the strengths of using symbols whenever possible, is that you don't have to update it every single time. I only had to update it once, and then everything else just fell into place automatically by using the variable names. The last part of the program instructions asked us to print the basketball's and volleyball's positions, and also the tip and tail positions of the arrow that points from the basketball to the volleyball. So that's what these print statements do. I'll uncomment them out so they will work. So this says print and then the text, and then we're going to print the basketball's position, the volleyball's position. The tip of the arrow is going to be at the volleyball's position. So I could have typed in volleyball.pos, but what I decided to do was to have it print the tip of the arrow using the attributes for the arrow. So if the position of the arrow, which is the tail of the arrow, is given by this .pos, then the tip is going to be where the tail is plus the axis. So that's going to give us the end location of the arrowhead. And then the beginning position of the arrow is going to be just simply the position of the arrow, because that's the way the arrow is defined. It's defined as the position of the arrow is the tail of the arrow, and then the tip is going to be located at the axis plus the position. And if we run it, so that's unchanged, and then here are the print statements that gives us the location, and we should be able to double check and make sure this is consistent. The basketball is at -425, the volleyball is at 3, 1, -2, and then the arrow, the tip of the arrow, remember, is going to be pointing at the volleyball, so this should match up, and it does. They're both 3, 1, -2, which is good. Like I said, I could have made this easier by making the position of printing over here. I could have printed the tip of the arrow as the volleyball's position, but that's where it's supposed to end up. But here I'm trying to use the arrow's attributes to show you that the tip of the arrow also happens to be the location of the volleyball without actually using the volleyball variable. Okay, so my screencast accidentally paused. I'm not sure where we are, but here are the print statements again, and the basketball is at -425, the volleyball's position's at 3, 1, -2, and the tip of the arrow is also at 3, 1, -2, which makes sense because the tip of the arrow is supposed to be where the volleyball is. And then the tail of the arrow is at -425, which makes sense because the tail of the arrow is supposed to be where the basketball is. And what I've tried to do is make the statements that give us the tip of the arrow and the tail of the arrow use the arrow's attributes rather than the volleyball and the basketball's attributes. I wanted to show you, like, for sure that that's really where they are. And this is an example of a good, high quality screencast. Okay, good luck on your own. Thanks.